I bought the Fight Island 7 Calvin Kattar alter ego skin, so you don't have to. Now, it wasn't particularly in my bingo cards to load up UFC6 and see this version of Calvin Kattar. At first I thought, oh, this is probably the skin from the night where he beat the living hell out of Giga Chikadze. This is Fight Island 7. This is the night he stepped into the octagon with Max Blessed Ultra Instinct Holloway. A night that no UFC fan who was watching at the time will ever forget. So it left me with one question. Why this version? Well, I didn't have to scratch my head too long. The answer was obvious. Max Holloway. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this was the first MMA event to be held on ABC. Man, what a debut. Historical event and pandemic aside, UFC6 is definitely celebrating Max Holloway's career. And unfortunately for Calvin Kattar, Fight Island 7 will be remembered and talked about forever. And it became probably the most not even probably, let's just call it what it is. It is the most defining moment of Calvin Kattar's career. It's now what he's remembered for being punched in the face by Max Holloway while Max Holloway wasn't even looking at his face. And let's be honest, comment down below, how many times have you rewatched Max versus Calvin? If not the full fight, I know you've watched the highlights over and over and over again. I definitely did, and I'm probably gonna do it after I'm done editing this video, cause shit. But back to the topic. That night, Max, he just had a whole humble pie to serve out, and he made sure Calvin Kattar was stuffed. He made sure Calvin Kattar had seconds and thirds of that humble pie. And us fans, we love to see that. We love to see somebody get humbled and eat their words. I believe Calvin said something along the lines of being a senior while Max is a freshman in boxing, and Max, the freshman, came to play. I know y'all remember that part. But enough about the humbling. Calvin was still Calvin that night. He didn't suddenly forget how to box. He didn't suddenly become a bad fighter. Like I said, Max just happened to go full Ultra Instinct that night. Everything was flowing, read perfectly. Bro was listening to the commentary booth at the same time, using that as fuel. I mean, sometimes greatness just isn't about your opponent being bad. It's about the other guy putting together one of the greatest, best performances we've ever seen. Unfortunately, Calvin's entire career has been viewed through the lens of that one fight ever since. And honestly, that's why I dig this alter ego. That's why I spent the 15,000 coins on it. Cause Calvin is still one of the cleanest technical boxers in the featherweight division. So when you add that with this fresh character model and who he was the night of Fight Island 7, despite what the result and the outcome was, like I said, you have a very clean, technical fighter who wins with timing, discipline, fundamentals. And if you play him the way EA is trying to get us to play him, or using the flow boost and our perks, then Calvin Kattar, he might be one of the most satisfying fighters to use in UFC 6. And to expand on that though, you have to try to play him sim. So if you haven't watched any Calvin Kattar fights besides the Max Holloway fight, get a little familiar with Calvin and who he is and what he does. And let me tell you, man, them 1-2s, that jab straight, it's Calvin all day. It's the way to box. Like, you have to be patient when you use this, man. And it took me a couple of fights to kind of realize that and kind of remember who Calvin is, and also to start breaking a lot of the bad habits I've been picking up since UFC 6 dropped, with all the new animations and seemingly endless combinations you can throw. I've definitely picked up some bad habits, but now I'm getting back to trying to fight sim, trying to be disciplined, and have the most fun and realistic fights as I possibly can have. Although it's hard to find the right dance partner in UFC6. With that being said, it did take a couple of fights for me to get adjusted and to start realizing how I need to use this guy and how he's actually going to help me fix my own little habits and kind of make me better. So my first impressions of this Calvin Kattar alter ego, well, Calvin isn't flashy. You're not really going to overwhelm people with him. He's not a pressure fighter, but he is very, very rewarding. And when you start slowing the fight down, making reads instead of forcing exchanges, that's when Calvin comes alive. Now, perks tell the whole story about this alter ego, as they do for every fighter in the game. And I am guilty of this, but most people, I feel like, just read the perks and they kind of get the gist of what they do and they move on, and that's it. But in UFC6, they tell you exactly how the fighter is meant to be played. They're not random, they're building an identity. Calvin's main perk is Stinger. This is the perk that everything revolves around. You probably seen me catch a flow boost for it about 3 times already. You have more accurate, more powerful straights, so it's telling me to fight behind that jab, that 1-2. And right now, Max got my health low. That's okay. As you see, the Revenant Flow Boost just activated. It's a great perk to have. It was triggered simply because he had my short-term health low. Your short-term health is the health of the current round that you're in, not the long-term. So when it's pretty low and you land a nice shot, it could be anything. That Flow Boost gets triggered. And man, let me tell you, it gets better. This version of Calvin is built to last, and this perk is the perfect perk to have if you are in a championship fight with 4 or 5 rounds, simply because as the rounds go on, the improved health compounds. So by round 4, you're in really good shape, and you should probably have more health than your opponent, depending on how the fight's playing out, of course. So another perk Calvin has is Bulwark. EA is basically telling you don't stand in the pocket throwing bombs, don't waste your movement, pick your shots, and it rewards good defense. I unfortunately didn't activate or trigger this flow boost too much because I'm still figuring things out. I'm still figuring out Calvin himself. And Bone Saw. So we're gonna make this fight dirty. You're gonna get rewarded for elbows. That's another flow boost that I didn't trigger much in the matches that I had with Calvin, because I don't normally throw elbows. I don't know, I've always had this stigma since UFC4 about them, and it kind of stunted a little bit of my evolution of striking. But UFC6, I'm gonna pretty much change all that. I'm gonna not care so much. I'm gonna get dirty. I'm gonna get in the clinch. I'm gonna make fights ugly, and that's exactly what the Bone Saw perk does. It makes them pay. You know, it's dirty boxing. It's the quick knees. So knees, elbows, anything with them bones connecting, bro. So now you take all these perks that I just described to you that Calvin has. When you step back and look at the whole picture, EA paints it for you as clear as day. Calvin is not a pressure boxer. He's not much of a slugger. You're not gonna go out and starch somebody. I mean, not that it's impossible. Some of us just have that kind of play style sometimes when we figure out certain combinations and whatnot. He's not someone you're supposed to be throwing all these 6, 55 punch combinations with. He's a technician. He's a boxer. Every perk points in the same direction. With Calvin Kattar, you gotta stay disciplined. Fight behind your jab. Use your straight. Control range. Counter mistakes. Punish. You're a technical punisher. Just think of that. The perks aren't just abilities, they're instructions. So first and foremost, when you pick Calvin Kattar, especially if you pick him before your opponent does, if your opponent sees that Calvin Kattar is being picked in a ranked match, just understand, you're gonna be underestimated. Respect is already out the window because all they see when they see Calvin Kattar is Fight Island 7 and Max Holloway brutalizing him. I know I'm over communicating that, but that's just something you got to be aware with when you're using Calvin. So that also presents opportunities for you to counter aggressive players because people are just going to come for your head. That's what I've noticed. People are just going to come for your head. But just remember, if you're trying to force the offense, you're already using Calvin backwards. So what surprised me the most is landing one straight punch, especially after slipping, countering, honestly feels better than landing a crazy 8-hit combination. Winning with Calvin almost feels like solving a puzzle. It's like hitting Division 20 for the first time. You're really playing a boxing simulator. You're using a technician. You're making reads, creating openings. You're punishing those mistakes. It's just a complete different kind of satisfaction because you know that you're being underestimated, but you know that the fighter you're using can be one of the best featherweights at any time, and he can beat anyone at any time if used correctly. Now obviously this is like an unprovoked alter ego we were given by EA. I don't think anybody was particularly asking for a Calvin Kattar alter ego, but after using him, spending time with him, I completely understand why EA would add him. Not because of the result of what happened to him at the hands of Max Holloway, but because of the fighter that stepped into the octagon that night. If you enjoy technical boxing, timing, counter-striking, winning with fundamentals, flexing on your opponents because you don't need an elite superstar to win, Calvin Kattar is absolutely worth your 15,000 coins. The 15,000s that I spent on him so you don't have to. He is not the flashiest alter ego in UFC 6, but definitely one of the most rewarding. So my final rating for Calvin, fun, I'll give him a 7.5 out of 10 depending on who you fight. Competitiveness, we'll give him an 8 out of 10. Value, we'll give him an 8.5 out of 10. 3 reasons to not drop 15,000 gold coins on this Calvin Kattar alternate ego. He is not for sweats. So he's not for you if you are a pressure fighter. If you like to wrestle, you are not going to enjoy Calvin Kattar. That is not what he does. 3rd reason, he requires a lot of patience, timing, and good footwork to get the most out of him. 3 reasons why you should drop that 15k gold coins on him. Well, he's one of the first true alter egos in UFC 6. Eventually, we all want to try Calvin Kattar at some point, so you might as well have the updated model version where he looks a lot better with the updated graphics and hair texture, because they still have the same one from UFC 4. But the real reasons: elite technical boxing. If you enjoy piecing people up, playing chess inside that octagon, Calvin is your man. 2, he has perks that reward patience and fundamentals, so you're gonna be rewarded for that playstyle specifically. And 3, well, he's just so damn satisfying to use. One of the most satisfying boxing styles in UFC 6. That 1-2 is crisp, that 1-2 is fast, that 1-2 is powerful. So, fight behind that, and well, you'll see what I'm talking about in this video. And with all that being said, if you are confident in yourself, go ahead, get that Calvin Kattar, get it popping in the octagon. Hope you found this video informative. Let me know if there's anything you guys would like to see from this channel, anything you'd like me to cover about UFC 6. and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.